Welcome back, everybody, to another deep dive. Today, we are going to be tackling a story that has been generating a lot of buzz. It's a map, it's a map that was published on official Israeli social media accounts. And you might be thinking, a map, so what? But trust me, this map has sparked some serious reactions, particularly from several Gulf countries.
Yeah, you know what's really fascinating about these reactions? It's not just like mild disapproval. We're seeing some pretty strong condemnation from countries like Qatar, the UAE, and Saudi Arabia. And this is especially interesting because some of these nations have recently, they've taken steps to improve relations with Israel.
Okay, so let's back up for a sec. What exactly is it about this map that has everybody in such a tizzy?
Well, it depicts what Israel claims are its historical territorial rights. And these claims extend way beyond its current borders. We're talking parts of Palestine, Jordan, Lebanon, even Syria.
Wow, so essentially this is like a visual representation of what some people refer to as Greater Israel.
Exactly, it really is.
Okay, so for those of us who might not be totally up to speed on that, can you unpack that concept a little bit?
Sure. Greater Israel is an idea that's been around for a while now, primarily among certain right-wing groups in Israel. The basic idea is that the historical land of Israel, as described in, biblical texts, includes a lot more territory than the country currently occupies.
So it's tapping into a lot more than just, where the borders are drawn today.
Right. It goes way deeper than that. It's invoking a much deeper and potentially much more volatile historical narrative.
And especially sensitive, I imagine, given, the ongoing Israeli-Palestinian conflict and the decades-long occupation of Palestinian territory.
Of course, yeah. I mean, the international community has consistently advocated for a two-state solution based on pre-1967 borders, with East Jerusalem as the capital of a Palestinian state. But this map seems to be directly contradicting that vision.
So we've got this map promoting a vision of Greater Israel. And then we have these Gulf nations who, on the one hand, seem to be, warming up to Israel, but on the other hand, are coming out really strongly against this map. So where does all this leave, these kind of burgeoning relationships? Is this just a little bump in the road, or is it something more serious?
Well, that's the question, isn't it? It's definitely a test of these new relationships. Can they withstand this kind of disagreement, this fundamental clash of visions? On the one hand, the Gulf nations' response is definitely a signal to their own people and to the wider Arab world that they haven't abandoned the Palestinian cause.
So it's like a balancing act, trying to, cultivate closer ties with Israel without alienating other allies or appearing to turn their back on the Palestinians.
Exactly. And it's an especially tricky position to be in because the current Israeli government includes figures who've openly supported this Greater Israel concept. One prominent example is Finance Minister Bezalel Smotrich, who's been photographed alongside similar maps in the past.
So this isn't just some abstract idea. No. This is a perspective that's held by people who actually wield a certain amount of power.
It is. And that makes this map all the more significant. It's not just a historical artifact. It's a potential roadmap, even if unofficial.
Yeah.
For, future policies and actions.
Yeah, it feels like a lot more than just lines on a map.
It really does.
All right, so we've established that this map isn't just, some cartographic exercise. It's a visual representation of a very historically and religiously charged concept with some very real-world implications. But what are those implications exactly? That's what we're going to be delving into. After a quick break, so don't go anywhere. We'll be right back with more on this complex and controversial story.
So good.
We're back and ready to dig a little deeper into the potential consequences of this Greater Israel map and the strong reactions that it's provoked.
Yeah. One of the things that I find so interesting about this whole situation is that it really exposes the fragility of peace in the region. We've seen some progress, right, with certain Arab states taking steps toward normalization with Israel. But this map and the ideology that it represents really throws a wrench in the works.
Yeah, because it basically disregards the very foundation of the internationally backed two-state solution.
Exactly. And, to really understand the depth of that disregard, it helps to understand a little bit more about this. The two-state solution itself, it's an idea that's been around for decades, evolving over time, with the aim of creating an independent Palestinian state alongside Israel. The current framework is largely based on the pre-1967 borders, with East Jerusalem as the Palestinian capital. But this map ignores those borders entirely. It essentially absorbs large portions of what would be a future Palestinian state.
So it's not just, redrawing some lines on a map. It's about fundamentally challenging the very idea of a Palestinian state. And that has to have some pretty major repercussions beyond just, the immediate political fallout.
Absolutely. Think about the impact on the ground. If this greater Israel vision were to be pursued, it would likely mean, continued expansion of Israeli settlements in the West Bank, further displacement of Palestinians, making a contiguous and viable Palestinian state almost impossible.
And that's a recipe for more tension, more violence.
Unfortunately, yes. We've already seen, an increase in violence in the West Bank over the past year. This map could further inflame the situation, leading to more clashes, more instability, potentially even another full-blown conflict.
Not to mention the diplomatic fallout. I mean, the Gulf states' condemnations are a pretty clear indication that they aren't willing to ignore this issue, even as they pursue closer ties with Israel.
Yeah, their response definitely raises some important questions, like, will they be willing to continue normalizing relations with a government that appears to be moving in a direction that they so strongly oppose? And how will this affect Israel's standing in the international community more broadly?
Yeah, I imagine there's a lot of concern about Israel becoming increasingly isolated if it continues down this path.
Right, and then there's the question of how this plays out domestically, both within Israel and in the Palestinian territories, for example. Will this map embolden those within Israel who support Greater Israel? Could it lead to a further shift to the right within Israeli politics?
And on the Palestinian side, could this lead to a feeling of hopelessness? Like the possibility of a two-state solution of their own independent state is slipping away?
That's a very real concern, and that kind of despair can be incredibly dangerous, potentially fueling further radicalization and violence.
So it sounds like this map has opened up a Pandora's box of potential problems, both within the region and internationally.
Right.
But what about the people behind it? I mean, what are their motivations? Are they actually aiming for this Greater Israel? Or is this more about symbolism and political maneuvering?
Well, that's the million-dollar question, isn't it? It's hard to say for sure what the true intentions are here. Some people argue that this map is just that, a symbolic gesture, meant to appease certain elements within Israeli society and consolidate political power.
Like a way of saying, look, we haven't forgotten about these historical claims, even as we engage in these new relationships.
Right, exactly. But others believe that this map is a much more concrete indication of the government's long-term goals, a step toward actually implementing this vision of Greater Israel.
Which is a much more alarming prospect, given all the potential consequences we've just been discussing. So it seems like understanding the people behind this map, their ideology, their ultimate aims is absolutely crucial to understanding what happens next. All right, so we're back, and we've been spending this episode talking about this controversial map, this Greater Israel map that we've been calling it. It's a visual representation of an ideology that claims significantly more territory than Israel currently controls. We talked about the reactions from Gulf nations, the potential consequences of this vision, and how it challenges the two-state solution. But let's talk a little more about the people behind this vision. Who are these proponents of Greater Israel?
Well, it's not like a single unified group.
Yeah.
But the ideology does have its roots in certain interpretations of religious texts and historical narratives. Some proponents believe that the land described in the Bible as belonging to the Israelites should by divine right be part of a modern Israel.
So for some people, this is much more than just a political issue.
Right. It's a deeply held religious conviction.
So you've got this kind of blend of religious and historical justifications. But how much of this is about reclaiming, what they see as a historical birthright? And how much of it is about strategic and political goals?
It's tough to separate the two. I mean, for some people, it's definitely a matter of principle, a belief that they are entitled to this land based on, history and faith. But for others, there might be more pragmatic considerations at play, like controlling more territory could mean greater access to resources, enhanced security, maybe a stronger regional presence.
So a very complicated mix of motivations,
Exactly.
with some more driven by ideology and others by more practical concerns. But where does all of this lead? What's the end game for those who support this vision?
That's the question that a lot of people are asking. Some believe that the ultimate goal is to annex the West Bank and potentially other territories, formally incorporating them into Israel. Others think it's more about establishing a dominant presence in the region, ensuring Israeli control, even without formal annexation.
But either way, it seems to be a pretty direct challenge to the concept of a Palestinian state. And that brings us back to those really strong reactions that we were talking about. From the Gulf countries, they've condemned the map. But what concrete steps can they take? to try and counter this push for greater Israel?
Well, they could leverage their diplomatic relationships, put pressure on Israel to abandon this vision, reaffirm its commitment to the two-state solution. They can also work with the international community to make sure there's continued support for the Palestinians and try to prevent any unilateral moves by Israel to annex territory.
So trying to use their influence, both regionally and globally, to push back against this ideology. But what about the Palestinians themselves? I mean, where do they fit into all of this?
Yeah, that's a really crucial point. At the end of the day, any lasting solution to this conflict has to involve the Palestinians. Their voices need to be heard, their rights have to be respected, and their aspirations for self-determination need to be acknowledged.
It's a good reminder that this isn't just, some kind of geopolitical chess game. We're talking about real people.
Absolutely.
With real lives and the future of an entire nation hanging in the balance.
Okay.
So where do we go from here? Is there any hope for a peaceful resolution to this conflict that seems so intractable, especially with this greater Israel ideology seemingly gaining traction?
It's a really tough challenge. There's no doubt about that, this map. And the reactions to it, they really highlight just how deep these divisions run. But, history has shown us that even the most entrenched conflicts can be resolved if there's dialogue, compromise, and a willingness to see the other side's humanity.
It sounds like a long shot, but definitely a goal worth striving for.
It is. Peace may seem elusive right now, but it really is the only path to a future where both Israelis and Palestinians can live in security, dignity, and with self-determination.
Well, we've covered a lot of ground today, talking about this map, this ideology, the potential consequences, the reactions it sparked. This is definitely a story with far-reaching implications, for sure. But hopefully by talking about these issues, having these difficult conversations, we can help people understand this conflict a little bit better, and who knows, maybe even contribute to a lasting peace someday. So thanks for joining us for this deep dive. And until next time, keep exploring, keep questioning, and keep the conversation going.